G'day reptile fans. So this month I thought I'd do a video on Slug here, one of the inland taipans that we keep at my place for educational display. Now I thought I'd probably steer clear of the husbandry side of things, largely because anybody keeping a snake like this hopefully has more than a solid grasp on reptile husbandry. But on top of that, there's plenty of sort of natural history things about these guys that are really cool to talk about. So I thought I'd pull out the Inland Taipans and have a chat about the world's most venomous snake. Now, even the story of discovery of these guys is kind of interesting. They were first discovered in 1879 by a bloke called Frederick McCoy here in Victoria, way up in the northwest side of Victoria, which is in southern Australia for anybody who doesn't know. Now, after that, a couple more were found out in Burke in western New South Wales, but they actually disappeared from the record for 70 or so years before they were refound out in southwest Queensland. Now the first couple were identified as a brown snake, and the next two were identified as a black snake, and it wasn't until the 1970s where we finally realised that this guy is a close relative of the coastal taipan, who was already very well known to science. So they were known for almost 100 years before we figured out what they actually were. On top of that, there has never been another taipan found in Victoria or that part of New South Wales ever again. So they've essentially disappeared from the place that they were discovered. Now, as far as habitat goes, today these guys are largely found in that area of southwest Queensland, what we call the corner country or channel country. Now, the type of habitat they like is basically black cracking soil country, which out there it's so hot that essentially the clays crack open, and these guys spend most of their lives, about 90% of their time, in cracks underneath the soil. Now, they like this habitat for a couple of reasons. The first one is it helps them get away from the heat. These areas are some of the hottest places in Australia, so a snake found out in the open would bake to death pretty quickly. On top of this, they use these cracks to avoid predators. You wouldn't think the most venomous snake on earth has predators, but things like the parenti, the largest goanna in Australia, as well as king brown snakes, will love to eat these guys. They don't care he's the most venomous snake on earth, so he hides from those predators in these deep cracks. On top of that, he uses these cracks as a hunting ground to catch mice and rats, which are his favourite food. He essentially eats nothing other than mice and rats. Another really interesting fact about these guys is, as far as I'm aware, they're the only venomous snake in Australia that changes colour. Now, in the middle of summer, they turn a bright yellow, and over winter time, they turn quite dark, almost dull brown, almost black. Now, here in Australia at the moment, we're in the middle of autumn, and Slug here is starting to change colour. She's gone from this bright yellow, she's sort of brown now, and she'll get quite a bit darker by the time winter really gets going. And the reason they do this is where they live is really hot in summer, like I was saying. So you don't want to be a dark coloured animal. Dark colours absorb heat, and she wants to get away from all this heat. So they turn this bright yellow colour to repel some of that sunlight. Over winter time though, out in the desert it gets quite cool. So by turning this dark colour means that she can actually absorb heat really easily and get about her day without having to bask for hours on end. Now, the most famous feature about this girl is of course the fact that she's the most venomous snake on earth. Now, as a general rule of thumb, I don't like giving snakes like these titles because it's a little bit misleading. I tell a lot of people there's a huge difference with the most venomous snakes on earth and the most dangerous snakes on earth. How we measure them, it's called an Ld50 test. It's essentially how little venom does one species or another take to kill a mouse in 50% of cases in a laboratory. It's got nothing to do with how quickly does somebody die, what side effects they have, what their chances of survival, all these sorts of things. It's tested on mice. Now, of course, a species like her, who lives in a very harsh environment where she doesn't find much food and lives off mice, is going to have venom that works very, very well on mice. If we did this test on frogs, something like the red-bellied black snake here in Australia, it'd probably be more venomous. So, being a mouse-eating species, she's sort of got the upper hand on that test regarding toxicity. However, when you look at the numbers, people believe that a bite from this girl here has the potential to kill about 180 human beings or 500,000 mice. An interesting point though is Slug here actually came into my care after her last owner was bitten. There's been about 7 or 8 bites from inland taipans that I can find any record of, all of which happened in captivity, and they're all people working with snakes obviously, and there hasn't been a single death. Now, this is largely due to the fact that antivenin and first aid is so good, and even Slug's prior owner, he spent 15 days in hospital, largely on kidney dialysis the whole time, but today he's fairly well recovered and doing all the things he used to do. However, his partner decided that he wasn't really experienced enough to keep Taipans anymore, and so Slug came to live with us, where she goes to schools and agricultural shows and stuff to teach people about snake safety. Another interesting topic regarding the toxicity of the inland taipan is, of course, the story that these guys come in number 2 to the Belcher's sea snake. And there's a lot of old books that call the Belcher's sea snake the most venomous snake on Earth. And this actually all traces back to a study that was done on the Belcher's sea snake. And the way that we test this toxicity, like I said, is injecting venom into mice. In this test involving the Belcher's sea snake, the venom was injected into the test mice, what we call intramuscularly, straight into the mice. Whereas almost all other toxicity testing is done subcutaneously, under the skin, which is done largely because it best represents a snake bite, particularly here in Australia, where all our snakes have very short fangs. Now, as a result, it's kind of like comparing apples and rocks. The reason being is, yes, it showed us that if you inject the venom from a Belcher's sea snake directly into the body tissues of a mouse, it needs less venom than a taipan does if it's injected just underneath the skin, but it's not really a very fair comparison. Now, unfortunately, I can't find a single test of the Belcher's sea snake done subcutaneously, but several other sea snakes, very similar in toxicity to the Belcher's, have been done subcutaneously, and they don't even come close to how venomous this girl here is. So yes, a lot of people do call the Belcher's sea snake the most venomous snake on Earth, but there is no evidence to support it. The inland taipan continues to hold that title. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed having a look at Slug here, and if anybody is interested in any other videos to do with Australian wildlife, please do feel free to check us out. Our channel name is Wicked Wildlife. Other than that guys, thanks for watching. Thanks to Kenan and Tom for letting us post these and bring our Australian animals to you guys each month. And other than that guys, have a good one and take care.